We're going to take a look at 9.2. It's a little bit of a step backwards from what we were doing in 9.1. So in 9.1, we found the axis of symmetry using our formula negative b over 2a. And then we found 5 points. So we used our axis of symmetry to give us to help us guide the 5 points that we would use on our table. We're going to kind of step backwards from that. We're going to find our axis of symmetry, but then we're going to apply it to only find one of the 5 points that we were doing. The difference in 9.2 is that we're working with a little bit more robust numbers, or a little bit larger numbers in our equations. And so we're going to be following the order of operations, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, then addition and subtraction. So the first thing we're going to need to know and use on all of these is our axis of symmetry formula, which is negative b over 2 times a. So in our equation, we have our a value of 1, our b value of negative 8, and our c value of 12. So a equals 1, b is negative 8, and c is 12. However you'd like to list those out. And so we are going to find negative b over 2 times a. So that is going to be the opposite of b. So my b value here is negative 8 over 2 times 1. So the opposite of negative 8 is positive 8 over 2 times 1, which is 2. And that reduces to make 4. So our axis of symmetry is 4, and we write it as an equation as x equals 4. It is a line. It's a dashed line, and it's that mirror on our graph. It's like our mirror. The second point that we're going to find for our vertex. So this is our axis of symmetry. I'm going to label this AOS. The second thing that we're finding is our vertex. And so to find our vertex, we are going to take our axis of symmetry, the value we found, and we're going to replace it for x in our equation. So our axis of symmetry was 4, so I'm going to replace x with a 4 in my equation. And now I'm going to follow my order of operations. So the first thing, parentheses, there's nothing to do inside the parentheses. The next thing, exponents. I can work out 4 to the second power, which means 4 times 4, which makes 16. So I got y equals 16 minus 8 times 4 plus 12. Now I'm looking for any multiplication or division, which is right here, 8 times 4. So y equals 16. And then negative 8 times 4 is negative 32 plus 12. And now I'm doing addition and subtraction. I'm just putting this together. So we have y equals, we could put these two pieces together. 16 minus 32 makes negative 16. And then negative 16 plus 12 gives us negative 4. And so this is how we want to write our answer. When we made x 0, so this is for our vertex, when x was 0, when x was 4, because that's what we used, that's what we replaced in. When x was 4, y was a negative 4. So when we plugged in a 4 for x and solved the whole thing out, we got our answer of negative 4. So when x is 4, y is negative 4. And those are the two pieces we're going to be finding today. We were doing this before, but we were doing it 3 times. So here we're only doing it once. So again, I'm going to find my axis of symmetry. My a is 1, my b is 8, and my c is 18. And if you noticed, we're not really using the c in this formula. We're not using the c very much at all. So, but I'm listing it just so that you can see it. We have negative b, so I'm going to replace b over 2 times a. My b is 8, and my a is 1. So negative 8 over 2, which gives me negative 4. So my axis of symmetry, AOS, x equals negative 4. That's the first piece. We had to find our axis of symmetry. And now we're going to find our vertex by plugging in negative 4. So we're going to have, I'm going to replace my x, so I put parentheses, and now I'm replacing it with a negative 4. And we're going to evaluate. So we'll do negative 4 times negative 4, which is positive 16. I could combine these. 8 times negative 4 is negative 32, and then plus 18. So this one's very similar to the last one. I can put these two together and get negative 16 plus 18, and then y equals 2. So when I replaced, so for my vertex, when my x was a negative 4, my y ended up being a 2. Let's keep looking at these. So for our axis of symmetry, I have my A, my B, and my C, however you want to label these. And my axis of symmetry is negative B over 2 times A. So that's negative B over 2 times A. And I'm going to replace B with a 2 and A with a 1. So this is going to give us negative 2 over 2, which makes negative 1. So my axis of symmetry is x equals negative 1. And then we just use that, and we're going to replace x in our equation with a negative 1. So I'm going to use a negative 1 and a negative 1. So negative 1 to the second power is positive 1. 2 times negative 1 gives us negative 2, and we still have minus 1 here. And then I'm going to put these together. That's going to give me a negative 1. And then I'm going to put these together, and that's going to give me negative 2. So we write our vertex as x is negative 1 and y is negative 2. Here we have our A value, our B value, and there's no C value, so that's just a 0 there. Thankfully, we're not really using our C anyways in this, but we have negative B over 2 times A, so there's my B and there's my A. It's going to be negative 2 over 2, which makes negative 1. So for this one, my axis of symmetry, x equals negative 1. So the first thing. The second thing, now I'm going in and I'm replacing x with a negative 1. You don't really need to write in the C part because it wasn't there to start with. So I'm going to work out negative 1 times negative 1 gives me positive 1, and 2 times negative 1 gives me negative 2, and 1 minus 2 is negative 1. So for our vertex, x equals negative 1, that's my x value, and then y is also negative 1. All right, we're going to jump into some more challenging problems, these last 4. The process is still the same, so we're still finding our negative b over 2a first. So here's my b, here's my a. So I'm going to say negative 4 on top and 2 on the bottom. So the opposite of negative 4 is positive 4, and 2 times 2 is also 4. So 4 over 4 makes 1. So what we're doing now is we are going to go in and we are going to replace x with a 1. Forgot to write my squared down. There we go. Okay, this is where it starts getting a little bit trickier because we have to follow our order of operations. And our order of operations here is that we're going to look inside the parentheses. There's nothing to do. And then we're going to do anything that needs to be squared. So I'm going to square this first. And after I've squared this, then I'm able to multiply. If I multiply 2 times 1 and get 2, and then square that to make 4, it's going to give me a very different answer. So the first thing here, this 2 is going to stay the same, and it's going to multiply with, and now I'm working out 1 to the second power. So 1 times 1 makes 1. I'm just going to rewrite everything. I could have worked this out, but I'll just do it in the next step. So now I'm doing 2 times 1, which is 2. And I'm doing negative 4 times 1, which is negative 4. And this plus 4 needs to get rewritten down here. So now I can combine all of these. I'm going to put my negative 4 and positive 4 together. They're going to cancel each other out so that y equals 2. On my axis of symmetry was x equals 1, which means my vertex is my x value, comma, my y value. All right, see how the numbers are getting larger now. So we're going to do negative b over 2a. So my b value is negative 12, and my a value is 2. The opposite of negative 12, that's what this negative means. The opposite of negative 12 is positive 12 over 2 times 2, which is 4. And then 12 divided by 4, that's what this says. 12 divided by 4 is going to make 3. So my axis of symmetry, my AOS, is x equals 3. So now I'm going to go in here and rewrite this, but I'm going to replace my x with a 3. And I'm following my order of operations, so I have to do this exponent first. So I'm going to work this out. So I'm still going to have 2, and it's still multiplying, but now 3 to the second power means 3 times 3, so it's going to be 2 times 9 there. Minus 12 times 3. I could have worked that out, but I'll just do all my multiplication in this next step. So y equals 2 times 9 makes 18. Negative 12 times 3 will give us negative 36, and then plus 19. And then if you wanted to in your calculator, you could just do 18 minus 36, hit enter, get your answer, which would give you negative 18, and then hit plus 19. I'm going to just do these one piece at a time. So this would make negative 18 plus 19. And then these would make a positive 1. So y equals 1. So what we're really saying, our vertex is when x is 3, y ends up being 1. Those are the two pieces of information we're finding, our axis of symmetry and our vertex. So even though the numbers get larger, we're still following the same process. You're welcome to use a calculator to work this out. So we're saying negative b over 2 times a. Our b value here is negative 24, and our a value is negative 4. So the opposite of negative 24 is positive 24. And 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. And this is going to reduce to 24 divided by negative 8, which is negative 3. So we call this our axis of symmetry. X equals negative 3. Now I'm going to see what happens if I replace x but I'm going to replace it with a -3. And I'm following my order of operations. So my first operation that I have to take care of here is I have to square, I have to do -3 to the second power, which down here would make a +9. I'm going to rewrite everything else. And so even though these numbers look huge, we're going to just continue working this out. So check this out. We're multiplying this, and we're multiplying this. So this is going to make -36. This is going to make positive, and we're doing 3 times 4, which is 12. So this is going to make +72 minus 37. You would be welcome to use a calculator on these. Again, the numbers are bigger, but the process is the same. If I put these together, it's going to give me just a +36 minus 37. And then 36 minus 37 is -1. So my vertex is what my x equaled, which was -3, and what my y equaled when I plugged that in. Okay, last example. We're already through it. So here's our last example. -b over 2 times a, and in this case my a is a -1 and my b is a +2. Here's my a, here's my b. So we get -2 over -2, which ends up being a +1. So my axis of symmetry is x equals 1. So then we're going to come over here and we're going to plug that in. Y equals -. And I'm using a1. I'm replacing x with 1. I'm going to do 1 to the second power, which makes 1. But there's still that negative outside trying to multiply with it. Everything else stayed the same. Now I'm going to multiply these together. Negative, remember, means the opposite. So the opposite of a +1 is just a -1. We can just apply it that way. And then 2 times 1 is just +2. And then +1. And however you want to put these together, I see -1 and +1 are going to cancel each other out, so that y equals 2. Any way that you put that together, you're going to end up getting a 2. And then we write it as our vertex, which is a point. And our vertex here is x equals 1, y equals 2. So the whole thing to this is less work. We're finding less points than we did in 9.1. The difference is that the steps and the numbers that we're working with are a little bit more complicated. They're a little bit bigger, but that's the only difference. It's the same process from before. We're practicing it now with some larger numbers. Okay.